This guy is Alarak, and he's the evil Protoss hero. He's a melee assassin-ish that works well in smaller skirmishes, and his displacement ability makes it easy to catch someone out and stay on top of them. He's heavily reliant on his ability to snowball, and the less crowd control the opposing team has, the harder it is to stop him from doing what he wants. The only thing I would actually consider to be busted on this character is the way his snowball actually happens. He's also balanced entirely around how hard he is to play, so the more time on the character, the more obvious it becomes that he's a little more intimidating than just the numbers. Let's explain his abilities, starting on his snowball ability itself, his passive. Alarak starts with 100 sadism and gains more based on the talents he chooses, although in base kit he can gain up to 30 from takedowns at 3 per takedown. Show of Force is the main talent that's in a majority of builds for Alarak that essentially just gives him a sadism boost for what he already wants to do. The one talent that gives him a sorta uncapped amount is Rite of Rakshir, which gives him up to 300 off of damage instances and 250 off of takedowns on the marked target. The stacks themselves give the same amount in a percentage bonus damage to his spells as well as bonus lifesteal. Notice how him doing well results in him having to try less hard to kill future targets. His Q is alright, it's mostly a damage payload that he can either buy further into or just use it as front-loaded magic damage before using his autos to finish the target. It has a silence attached to it to help him finish a target before they can use a movement ability to escape. I think his talents make it a little better, but usually focusing on this ability in particular leads to more utility than an assassin playstyle. His W is what keeps him leaning toward an assassin more than a bruiser. By being able to isolate an enemy hero with a quick displacement, he can pick them off and move on. Its damage is negligible unless you have an insane amount of stacks, but some talents can really make it an ability to fear going anywhere near Alarak if you don't have a healer in arm's reach. Alarak can't necessarily build for telekinesis, but his best builds will buy into it at least a little, because it's kinda ridiculous to give a true assassin a displacement ability this strong. It can also affect Alarak, so this is how he can get out of sticky situations. But since this is his only crowd control, you really have to make it count and choose wisely when to make use of it. His E is kinda bland for an assassin ability, but it definitely expands on the idea of enemies mispositioning being Alarak's strongest point. He targets a unit and deals magic damage to everything in between and including the target. He also heals for hero's hit. It's the only ability Alarak needs to think about, since enemies in the middle take additional damage and thus heal him more if he hits a hero. Neither of his ultimates are particularly crazy. Counter-Strike makes you invulnerable for a short second that spits out massive damage, but it's easy to outmaneuver or just not hit him in a 1v1, and Deadly Charge is a way to get on targets, but has to be done out of combat since any damage interrupts the channel immediately. He plays kinda like an isolation assassin, but since he doesn't have a dedicated movement ability, it's hard to always make it to a target that's out of position. But if you have a tank, and if they're willing to cooperate, you can make this guy work with a little less effort than it looks. As is the case with any skill-based balancing, it's a pain to make him rewarding to play, but there's no reason to play a hard character with no reward, so the higher up you go in terms of average skill, the more it's just something to put up with. As for me, I haven't spent enough time on this character to emphasize exactly how punishing making any small mistake against him becomes.